Imagine this. A woman thinks she can replace a man who carries himself with calm gravity, only to discover too late that she has lost something irreplaceable. At first, she may chase excitement, passion, or the fleeting intensity of shallow attention. But when silence replaces his voice, when his absence echoes louder than his presence ever demanded, she begins to see the truth. The man she left behind was not merely a partner. He was an anchor, a mirror, a standard of strength that few men ever embody. And when that kind of man walks away, regret is inevitable because no storm can shake the foundation he built within himself. This type of man is not defined by wealth or appearance. His power is subtler, forged in the quiet discipline of self-command. Women regret losing him because he is rare. He neither clings nor begs, nor does he play the games of insecurity that entangle weaker spirits. He embodies the ancient Stoic principle that true freedom lies in mastering the self. His emotions may run deep, but they do not spill recklessly. They are channeled, disciplined, like a river that carves stone through patience rather than flood through chaos. What fascinates and terrifies is that he does not fear loss. While others measure worth by external validation, he measures by alignment with his own principles. He can love deeply, but he never worships blindly. He can give generously, but never in self-erasure. Women discover too late that this detachment is not coldness, but clarity. They realize that in him, they once touched a man who was not enslaved to desire, who did not crumble under rejection, who lived by a code deeper than fleeting attraction. You might think women crave constant affirmation, endless proof of devotion. Yet when faced with a man who does not perform for approval, but simply is, unshaken, they cannot help but feel drawn. In his silence lies more strength than in another man's loud declarations. In his gaze rests the weight of someone who knows himself, who has walked through fire and emerged not begging for rescue, but tempered into steel. To lose such a man is to lose a mirror that once forced her to rise higher, to grow sharper, to meet his steadiness with her own truth. This man does not confuse kindness with weakness. He can be tender, but it is a tenderness rooted in choice, not in desperation. He does not scatter his energy like seeds on barren soil. Instead, he plants deliberately, giving where growth is possible, withdrawing where shadows demand endless sacrifice. When he leaves, a woman often feels as though she has been exiled from a kingdom she did not know she inhabited. The quiet order he carried within him had shielded her from her own chaos. Only in his absence does she recognize the fortress he provided, not through control, but through the unyielding stillness of his spirit. Psychology calls this individuation, the rare path where a man integrates shadow and light, instinct and reason, vulnerability and strength into one coherent whole. Most never reach it. They swing between extremes, too soft, drowning in neediness, or too hard, hiding behind masks of arrogance. But this man, he walks the razor's edge, balanced, authentic. Women regret losing him not because he was flawless, but because he was whole. And in a world of fragments, wholeness is intoxicating. Think of the way he carries silence, not as withdrawal, but as presence. His stillness forces you to feel your own restlessness. His refusal to react to provocation reveals the hollowness of manipulation. His patience dismantles drama before it ignites. And when he finally speaks, every word carries weight, not because he shouts, but because his silence has built anticipation. This is the man who reminds others, without teaching, without preaching, that mastery of self is the rarest and most magnetic force alive. Perhaps you have seen it in your own life. Maybe you dismissed someone who seemed too composed, too unmoved, only to find yourself haunted by his memory later. Maybe you took his restraint as indifference, when in fact it was the highest form of care. The refusal to contaminate love with chaos. Maybe you thought he could be replaced by someone more expressive, only to discover that the world is full of noise, but starved of depth. This is why women regret losing him. Because once you have been held by the gravity of a man who governs himself, every other embrace feels lighter, thinner, less real. Because once you have known the security of his presence, absence feels like exile. Because once you have touched a man who lives by principle, every compromise tastes of ashes. He does not rage when abandoned. He does not chase when dismissed. He simply continues walking the path of his own becoming. And in that walk lies the cruelest truth of all. The more he grows, the more she realizes what she has lost. A man like this becomes unforgettable because he exists as a mirror to the deepest yearnings of the human psyche. Jung described it as the anima and animus dance, the feminine soul searching for its masculine counterpart, not in superficial charm, but in an archetype that grounds and completes. When she walks away from him, she often discovers she has severed herself from the very image her unconscious has long been chasing. It is not his body she longs for, nor even his words, but the structure of his presence, the way he embodied the eternal masculine principle of order, clarity, and restraint. He is not flawless, nor does he pretend to be. His shadows are integrated rather than hidden. He has faced envy, anger, desire, fear, but instead of projecting them outward, he has wrestled with them privately, forged them into wisdom. That is why he cannot be manipulated with threats of withdrawal or accusations of coldness. He has already confronted abandonment in himself. He has already stood alone in the silence of his own doubts and emerged unbroken. How can you shake a man who has befriended solitude? How can you bend a man who has bent himself first, willingly, to discipline? This is why women regret, because such men expose illusions. They show you what love looks like without chains, without bargaining, without the frantic fear of being left. They love from abundance, not from lack. And once you have tasted abundance, lack tastes bitter, no matter how sweetly it is disguised. You, listening now, must ask yourself, are you this kind of man? Or are you the kind that collapses when affection is withheld? Do you need constant reassurance, or can you walk calmly, even when no one is watching, no one is praising? Can you hold your own hand in the dark, so that when you hold hers in daylight, it is not a plea for rescue, but an offering of strength? Women regret losing the man who has already answered these questions in silence through the architecture of his life. Notice the way such a man moves through the world. He is not in a rush. He does not chase the approval of strangers, nor does he decorate his insecurities with masks of arrogance. He lives like a mountain, firm, immovable, sometimes misunderstood, but always there. And because he is steady, storms do not frighten him. Rejection does not cripple him. Betrayal does not end him. His worth does not rise or fall with the tides of someone else's desire. When he loves, it is a choice, not a compulsion. When he walks away, it is not to punish, but because the path no longer aligns with his truth. And this is what leaves women haunted. They realize, too late, that they could not bend him into neediness. They could not use silence to provoke panic. They could not force him into proving his worth. His absence proves more powerful than the presence of men who beg to stay. Modern psychology calls it secure attachment. Ancient philosophy called it virtue. Both point to the same reality. A man who governs himself cannot be governed by the fear of abandonment. And that is the man women regret losing. The one who did not cling, who did not break, who stood tall enough that she had to rise in order to meet him. His value does not diminish in solitude. He is not half searching for a whole. He is whole, searching for resonance. That is why, when he departs, regret sets in like a slow fire. For she begins to realize that most men are not whole. Most men bleed their wounds into others, demand constant reassurance, or hide behind aggression to mask fragility. But the one she lost, the Stoic man, was both soft and hard, yielding yet unbending, compassionate yet disciplined, and the longer time stretches, the clearer the contrast becomes. The men who follow are either too eager or too detached, too fragile or too indifferent. None hold the paradox of strength and gentleness in equal measure. None can replicate the sense of gravity he carried simply by existing. And so, she begins to remember not just his words, not just his touch, but the weight of his silence. The silence that made her feel both safe and exposed, cherished and challenged. Regret grows not in a day, but in the slow unfolding of recognition. The kind of man she once dismissed as too calm, too unmoved, becomes the very standard against which she now measures every other, and none compare. Regret deepens because memory has its own cruel way of ripening with time. In the beginning, she may convince herself she has made the right choice, that passion, novelty, or the easy flattery of another man will fill the silence he left behind. But memory is not a slave to her will. Slowly, it begins to replay moments she overlooked, the steadiness in his tone when chaos surrounded her, the way his calm gaze disarmed her anger, the way his presence alone steadied her breathing. What once felt ordinary becomes rare in hindsight. What once felt secure now feels irreplaceable. Such men are not common because they are not born from ease. They are shaped in the crucible of restraint. Where others collapse into their impulses, he built discipline. Where others shouted to prove dominance, he mastered silence. Where others scattered energy in pursuit of validation, he conserved his strength until his words and actions became like arrows, few but precise, cutting through confusion with clarity. This is the essence of Stoic power, not to dominate others, but to master the self so fully that others cannot help but orbit around the gravity of that mastery. And this gravity is what she misses. The world is full of charm, but charm evaporates quickly. The world is full of intensity, but intensity burns out. What the world lacks is gravity. The man who remains unshaken, not because life has spared him suffering, but because he has carried suffering like a torch through darkness and emerged with his own soul intact. You may feel the sting of this truth as you listen, because it challenges you directly. Do you have gravity, or do you merely have motion? Do you pull others into the security of your orbit, or do you fling yourself wildly, hoping to be caught? Do you live with a still center, or are you at the mercy of every emotional storm? Women regret losing the man with gravity, because once gone, they recognize that nearly all others are drifting, unstable, lost in themselves. Consider the archetype of the king in Jungian psychology. Not a tyrant, not a weakling, but the man who holds authority without needing to flaunt it. His power is not loud, because it does not need to be. His presence commands, not because he demands, but because he embodies order. This man is not the loudest in the room, but the one everyone instinctively glances toward when chaos erupts. That is the man she regrets losing, the inner king, the integrated masculine who governs not through force, but through stability. And what of love? Here lies the deepest wound. She may have thought his love was too quiet, too unadorned, lacking the drama of those who showered her with frantic affection. But drama fades, noise exhausts, and when it fades, she remembers his quiet love. The way it was patient, the way it asked for nothing, the way it remained steady even when tested. It was not the fire that burned quickly and consumed her, but the hearth that warmed her bones. And when the hearth is gone, winter feels colder than she ever imagined. There is a paradox here. He was easy to take for granted precisely because he did not demand. He never begged, never performed, never clung. And so, she may have mistaken his strength for indifference. Only later does she see that indifference and self-mastery are not the same. His restraint was not absence of feeling, but presence of control. And that, once gone, cannot be replicated. This is why women speak of the one who got away. Not the most handsome, not the richest, not the loudest, but the one who stood as a standard of inner strength, who lived by principle, who did not fracture under pressure. Losing him is not just losing a man. It is losing the mirror that reflected her own potential to rise higher. And so, regret is not only about him, it is about her. About the recognition that in losing him, she lost an invitation to become her truest self. Regret becomes more than nostalgia. It becomes revelation. She begins to see that what she mistook for emotional distance was actually the mark of a man who had done his shadow work. While others carry unhealed wounds into every relationship, projecting jealousy, insecurity, or rage onto those closest to them, he had already wrestled with his inner chaos. He did not need her to complete him. He wanted her to join him. And when she walked away, she did not just lose a partner. She lost the rare experience of standing beside someone who had already integrated his darkness into strength. This is what unsettles her most. In the beginning, she may dismiss his self-control as rigidity, his silence as disinterest, his calmness as lack of passion. But as the years pass and she meets men who swing wildly between extremes, she begins to see the difference. One man overreacts to every perceived slight. Another drowns her with constant need. Another hides behind arrogance, terrified of being exposed. But none carry the paradox that he embodied. The capacity to love deeply without being enslaved. The ability to give without collapsing. The willingness to stand alone rather than betray his integrity. Think about what this means for you. If you are a man listening now, ask yourself, have you faced your own shadow, or do you still bleed it into those around you? Do you demand others soothe wounds you have not healed, or do you confront them head-on until you emerge with the kind of strength that no one can steal? Because make no mistake, this is the reason women regret losing him. Not because of what he gave her, but because of what he revealed about herself. The Stoics taught that suffering is not to be feared, but transformed. Epictetus reminded his students that no one can harm you without your consent, for the true battlefield is within. This man lived by that creed. He did not hand over his power in moments of anger. He did not collapse when rejected. He did not allow the chaos of the external world to corrupt the order he had forged internally. And once a woman sees that in a man, she can never unsee it. Every other man will feel less secure, less centered, less whole, There is something archetypal in this. He becomes not just a man she lost, but a symbol of what is missing in herself. His silence reflected her noise. His steadiness exposed her turbulence. His self-mastery highlighted her lack of control. And so, regret takes on a sharper edge, not only longing for him, but longing for the version of herself that only existed in his presence. She realizes she did not just lose a relationship, she lost a mirror that challenged her to rise. You can sense this in the way people speak of the one that got away. Beneath the surface, it is rarely about lost romance alone. It is about lost growth. It is about missing the rare opportunity to stand beside someone who would not indulge weakness, but demand strength, not through cruelty, but through example. To lose him is to lose the man who did not bend to her storms, and therefore forced her to face her own. And here lies the deepest truth. Women do not regret losing ordinary men, because ordinary men are replaceable. They regret losing the one who was whole, who carried the timeless weight of discipline, who lived by principle when others lived by impulse. They regret losing the Stoic man because he was not simply a lover. He was a force, a reminder of what love could look like when stripped of insecurity, when rooted in freedom. Regret, when it matures, carries a paradoxical weight. It is not just about missing what was once possessed, but about finally seeing its true nature after it is gone. A woman who loses such a man often feels the quiet ache of having touched a presence she could not fully understand at the time. She realizes, with growing clarity, that his restraint was not a lack of passion, but the refinement of it. He was not absent. He was present in a way that did not need to announce itself. He was not unmoved. He was moved, yet governed by an inner compass that kept his heart aligned with principle rather than impulse. To lose him is to lose stability in its purest form. Other men may be exciting, louder, more eager to display affection, but beneath their gestures lies a nervous hunger, a fear of rejection that distorts their love. With him, there was no distortion. His love was clear, clean, undiluted by panic or need, and that kind of love leaves an imprint. When she remembers him, it is not merely the memory of affection, it is the memory of security, of knowing she was with someone who could stand unshaken even when the world fell apart. That memory haunts because it is irreplaceable. You must ask yourself, are you the man who can leave such a mark, or the man who fades quickly from memory? Do you live in a way that, when gone, your absence will echo louder than another man's presence? Women regret losing the Stoic man because he is unforgettable, not because of grand gestures, but because of the unbreakable essence he carried. His life was not performance, but alignment. His actions did not fluctuate with moods or external validation. He did not live in reaction to others. He lived in harmony with his principles. That is what made him steady, and steadiness is what the soul craves when the storms of life strike. This regret also exposes something deeper, a truth about human psychology. What people often dismiss in the present becomes what they long for in the future. The calm man is overlooked when drama feels intoxicating. But he is remembered when drama leaves only wounds. The disciplined man may feel unyielding in the moment, but he becomes the measure of strength when others collapse under pressure. Regret teaches through contrast. By losing him, she learns that most men do not embody principle, they embody reaction. And once she has known the difference, she cannot return to blindness. The Jungian archetype of the warrior lives within him too. not the reckless warrior who charges without thought, but the disciplined one who wages battle inward before lifting a hand outward. He conquers himself daily, and this is why he could never be conquered by her silence, her tests, or her withdrawal. He loved her, but he never needed her to validate his worth. That is why, in losing him, she feels she has lost something eternal, something that cannot be found in the ordinary flow of men who have not mastered themselves. This realization often comes slowly, but when it does, it is sharp. She remembers the moments when he did not argue, when he chose stillness over escalation, when his presence dismantled conflict before it began. She remembers the way he refused to be controlled, not through cruelty, but through calm refusal to betray himself. And she regrets, because she sees that most men are ruled by their wounds, and he was ruled by his wisdom. To lose him is to lose not only a relationship, but a standard, a living example of what masculinity can be when tempered by discipline and depth. And when a standard is lost, all else falls short. Regret, when it ripens into full awareness, feels like a reckoning. She begins to understand that what she once thought was control was, in truth, freedom. His detachment was not an absence of love, but the refusal to let love descend into chains. Where others clung out of fear, he released with dignity. Where others demanded proof, he trusted the strength of his own presence. And it is this quiet refusal to be enslaved by attachment that leaves her haunted, because it is only in losing him that she sees how rare it is. Other men crumble at the threat of abandonment. They plead, they fight, they perform. But he never begged. He never lowered his standards to secure temporary affection. His absence was not a tactic, but a truth. He could walk away because he was already whole. That is the kind of man women regret losing. The one who never needed to barter his soul for company. The one whose solitude was rich enough that he could love without fear. You may feel the weight of this now. Ask yourself, could you stand alone without bitterness, without collapse? Could you walk away from someone you desire, not because you stopped caring, but because they crossed the line of your principles? Most cannot, but this man could, and that is why his presence burned itself into memory. He was not controlled by emotion. He directed it. He was not a prisoner of longing. He allowed it, but never let it command him. Regret also grows because she remembers his strength in moments of testing. How many men erupt at disrespect, shouting to assert their dominance? He did not. His silence cut deeper than anger ever could. His refusal to be pulled into chaos disarmed every attempt to provoke him. And in that composure lay a terrifying truth. She could not break him. No matter what she tried, he remained himself. To lose him is to lose the rare man who could not be bent, even by love. Jung spoke of individuation as the path to wholeness, integrating both the shadow and the light into one unified self. This man embodied that path. He did not hide his darkness, but he ruled it. He did not deny his longing, but he governed it. He did not bury his pain, but he carried it with grace until it became wisdom. That is why he cannot be replaced. Because what women regret most is not the loss of affection, it is the loss of wholeness, the presence of someone who had become complete when most still wander in fragments. And so, time becomes her teacher. The new men in her life may dazzle at first, but the illusion fades. One is too reactive, another too fragile, another too proud. None carry both strength and gentleness in equal measure. None embody the paradox of power and restraint. And so, Even as she moves forward, her memory drags her back, not because she wants the past, but because the past revealed a standard that the present cannot meet. This regret is not punishment, it is revelation. It is the psyche awakening to what it once had but could not see. And beneath that regret lies a lesson for every man listening now. When you master yourself, you become unforgettable. Not because you perform, not because you charm, but because you embody a kind of freedom that others secretly crave. Regret eventually transforms into silence, the kind that follows a storm once the wind has passed. For her, it is the silence of realization, the understanding that she had once stood beside a man who had already become whole in a world of fragments. She remembers how he carried himself, not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. His words were never wasted, his emotions never scattered. Even in conflict, he was not consumed. He remained present, grounded, disciplined. That is why he cannot be forgotten. He was not simply a partner, but a force that revealed something eternal. Other men will try to fill the void with gestures, promises, even desperation. But these attempts only highlight the difference. Where they rush, he waited. Where they faltered, he endured. Where they depended on her response to feel alive, he already lived from within. And so the comparison never favors them. She sees, perhaps too late, that her loss was not just of a relationship, but of a man who embodied what philosophers once called virtue, the uncorrupted alignment of reason, emotion, and action. For the man who listens now, understand this: you cannot fake such presence. You cannot pretend discipline. It is written in the way you breathe, in the pauses between your words, in the way you carry silence as if it were strength rather than emptiness. A woman regrets losing you only when your life is built on foundations so firm that her absence does not shake them. That is when she realizes that she did not hold you. You allowed yourself to be held. That is when she learns that your worth was never in her approval, but in your own mastery. This is the great secret of the Stoic man. His power is not in dominating others, nor in avoiding love. It is in living with such clarity that his presence becomes a mirror. With him, there is no room for illusions. You either rise or you fall away. And once you fall away, you remember him, because the truth cannot be forgotten. Here, the story reaches its final note: freedom. For the Stoic man, loss is not tragedy, but release. He does not cling to those who cannot see him, nor does he harden his heart against love. He simply continues forward, carrying the same stillness, the same discipline, the same unshaken center. And for her, the regret lingers, not because he punished, but because he revealed.